Hey you guys, this is Josh with Homesteading Family, and today we are doing a garden rehab. I'm moving one of my bean tunnels, and so I'm going to show you how to build one from scratch. Now, I call this a bean tunnel because that's from the guy that showed me how to do this. That's how he used it. He used it to grow beans on the trellis here on these panels and grow different crops inside in the shade. But what's really cool about this structure is that you can grow beans, cucumbers, tomatoes, melons, all kinds of things on it. So we're going to jump in and get right to building it. And as we go through it, and at the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about how you can use this thing. Okay, so before we get into the how-to, we better talk a little bit about why I use these panels and different methods, because I've tried all kinds of different methods for trellising beans, trellising tomatoes, cucumbers. Those are mostly what we do. I know some people do melons and squashes, and this could totally work for that too. But from tomato cages to building things out of sapling wood to T-posts and string lines. I've tried all those different methods and nothing really just ever worked that great. And it's always just a whole lot of work. And so I wanted something that was a little more permanent. And while it's a bit of work to put in, it's pretty low maintenance. And I had a neighbor, an old guy who loved his beans, and he had one of these bean tunnels using these hog panels or cattle panels. People call them different things. And I'll tell you what, they're really cool. These things hold up, they last. The beans, the tomatoes, everything grows on them really well. They're actually really easy to clean off at the end of the season. And they're very adaptable. You can make them any size you want. We've got about 60 plus feet here because that's the size of our garden rows, and that's the size of what we need to grow the amount of food we've got. But you could do one that was just 3 to 4 foot and anywhere in between. Okay, so in the how-to part of the video, I'll show you how we get these into position. But these are 16-foot, I call them cattle panels. Again, you might call them something different in your area. And you can get them anywhere from about 2.5 foot wide to about 4.5 foot wide. I think these are a little over 4. So you're going to have your panels. Yes, you could build this out of something else, but this is just really permanent and really great to work with. You're going to need something to hold it in at the base, and there's a few different ways to do this, but I wanted to try to use materials that I have on hand and also that are inexpensive if I had to buy them. So I've got a whole lot of rebar here. This is really inexpensive, cut into 2-foot lengths, and these are going to be the rods that are going to hold in our boards. These are cedar boards, about 16 foot long. I got these, I think, out of the barn when I bought the place. They happen to be around. You can use any kind of wood. What I like about cedar is it's not toxic like a pressure treated or a landscaping tie, and it's pretty rot resistant, so it's gonna last a whole lot of years. So for me, this was just a really inexpensive way to go about it. I'd encourage you to just be resourceful, see what materials you can find. But if you need to buy something, try to go natural. The cedar's a little pricey, but it's organic and it's gonna hold up well. These guys are, really inexpensive. And if you're doing a short run, you could just use more of these. We're going to place these about every 4 feet, as you'll see. If you wanted to just go with the panels, you could do these about every 2 foot on the ends and in the middle, and that would also work. But I like a solid board that's going to help hold our bed in so that the soil's not falling out of the bed. And for the scope of what we're doing, this is just going to work a lot better. So let's get into putting this together. Okay, so in our case here, we've had to, these are not brand new beds, we've had to reshape a couple beds to get this to work. And we've already got our first run in here, you can see. We've already got our first board in, and I'm going to show you in just a minute how to use a string line and a piece of rebar to get a nice straight line. But this is already in, our soil's up against it, and we're going to want to measure. Now, these cattle panels are about 16 feet long, and they're a good length because it works out that you can walk in them pretty easily. You can do different widths. This one over here is 6 foot wide, and it works pretty well, but it's a little narrow at the base, and we're going to go 7 foot here and we'll still get enough height to walk through it. So you want real straight lines. So we're going to measure out 7 feet. Tristan, you can get going on your end. Again, this is a really inexpensive way to do this. This has all kinds of good purposes for the type of raised beds that I do in the garden and getting nice, good straight lines. A little bit of mason string line and a piece of rebar. You'll see me use this a lot. And I want 7 foot between my wood, so I'm going to mark it out about 7'2". And you just want to hammer that in. Tristan's doing the same down on that end. You don't want dirt in your tape measure. You're going to the inside. In this case, we want our string line to the inside of the bed. It's good and straight. Now we're going to lay our boards in and just get them close so that we can see where our joints are and where we want our braces. You want to come on down here? Just going to lay it in close, but make sure it's out of the way. Now, a couple things to note here. You do want your ground reasonably flat. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want it reasonably flat. And you can see we've cleaned this up, raked it out a little bit. We may have to make a few adjustments as we go along. If you're a perfectionist type person, then you're maybe going to want to shoot grade, and you can really dial it in, but that's not necessary to make this work. It just needs to be reasonably flat, and you can adjust as you go a little bit. Okay, so we've got our boards in, but out of the way of the string line. This helps us just see where we want to put our stakes at. And in this case, I've already used these boards, so it's pretty close, but you're going to want one a few inches in from the end. And about every 4 foot if you're using a 2x material. If you were going to go thinner with a 1x material, I'd maybe go to 2 or 3 feet. So I'm just going to lay these all out close to where I want them. Go back and get some more. Okay. So putting in the stakes is relatively easy if you don't have too many rocks in your soil. If you got rocks, then that's kind of tough. But this doesn't have to be perfect. We want it close, getting it as parallel as we can. And you can get out of level, or you can just use gravity and get it close to your line. Tap it in. Now we're not going to tap them in all the way. Just going to get them about to the line. You'll see why in a little bit. So we've just got to go down the line, get all these in. Okay. Okay. You got to make sure when you get to a joint, you need one on each side within a few inches of the end. That was it. So here we're going to lay our boards in. The way this works, there is no need to fasten these. You sure can if you want to, but because I've got the stakes on the outside, the soil plus the panels are going to actually just hold the board in place. So there's no reason even to fasten this really. So we're just going to put them up against the boards. Make sure it's reasonably flat. Tristan, you want to see the bottom edge there? We want to pick it up. Look down the bottom edge. Okay, bottom edge. And do we have any rock in it?
No, it's just a lump.
Okay, we just want to take a little bit of soil, hold it into place. Okay, next one. And we're going to end up a little bit, it looks like, high right in here, I'm going to guess. I'm not sure of it. So you may end up going, oh, no. Are we good and flat? Hey, I like it when a plan comes together. Okay, so you can see we've got a nice straight line. It may not be perfect, but it is gonna work great. So we need to get the string line out of our way. We're gonna need this again, so we're just gonna set it off to the side, not too far away. Okay. Next, we're gonna start setting our stakes just flush to the top of our boards. That's all you gotta do. Okay, you got that? And while Tristan's doing that, I'm gonna start to shape the beds up just a little bit. Okay, so we're getting ready to shape these beds, and I wanna just pull a little in up against the boards. And I don't wanna compact this overall, but I do wanna tamp it in just lightly to hold the boards into place before we start setting the panels. So we'll finish this up, and then we wanna shape this row pretty well, because it's a lot easier to get it shaped up before the panels go in. So remember, we're building basically permanent beds that we will rarely till. We'll just work the soil lightly on the top and with a broad fork. So the more we can get this shaped up now to have it nice and ready and easy to work, the better. Okay, so now we're gonna set this bed on the inside because I wanna get this all shaped up. And 30-inch beds is about as wide as you want to go because you can't reach it from the other side. You want to be able to reach it from the inside. So we're going to create, we've already done it on that side, we're going to create a 30-inch bed here. Go in with your tape a little. Okay. This is just going to guide us to get our row, our planter row, all shaped up. And go do the same thing on the other side. Okay, we've got our string line set for a 30-inch bed, and now we've got to come through and just shape the soil and just get it all graded and set up well. So that's done before we get the panels in. Okay, so we've got our row all set, our bed all established real nice, and we're just going to go ahead and spread the mulch right now, just because it's a little easier to do before we get the panels up. Okay, so we've got everything in place. We've gone ahead and got our bed shaped up and most of it mulched just because that's easier to do before we get the panels in. And now comes the fun part. And this is probably the most difficult part, is just wrestling with these panels. So Tristan, you ready to go? So, yep. We've actually got a little more room this time than we did before. So just keep it braced against yourself. Okay, so you want to get these in, line them up, and we just want to step them in nice and even. And you got to try to keep them parallel to your boards and try to keep them going in even on both sides. Okay, you're a little high on this end. Nope, Tristan, on that end, you got to feel it out. You're a little high right there. Nope. Okay, so this part takes two people, and this is one of the trickiest part, is wrestling these. And because we don't have a lot of room, we want to carry them in already bent. So we're gonna just hold it against my hips here. Tristan's doing the same. And just pull it up. Tristan, come towards me. And then we can just carry them like this. So remember, you want them to go in, you got to get right against that and nice and even. Okay, so a couple of things to know as you're coming in here. These are not going to line up at first. We're going to come through and tie them together in a little bit once we get them all in, but that is normal. They're going to flop a little. What you want to make sure and do is they need to go in even, and you want to make sure and just line up your rows. That's the longer you do this, the more important that is. And we'll come through later in several spots and tie these together, but when you're putting them in right now, you want to make sure that they are lined up. One other tip while we're here and I'm thinking about it, and we got this one upside down. Okay, so here you go. Here's what you don't want to do. I didn't see this and I don't know why it's flipped over. If we're going to use this for a hoop house, I want these side bars underneath, because when we go to put the plastic over it, they're going to have a tendency to catch on these. If you're just doing it for a bean tunnel or trellising tomatoes and you're not going to make a hoop house out of it, this doesn't matter so much. But if you're going to put that plastic on, you want them flipped the other way. We are maybe going to do that here, so we want to flip it. Make sure we're connected. We're lined up. Looks like I need to go down just a little. Okay. All right, so we got that fixed. We're all lined up. Now we're going to roll. Okay, so check that out. We got it's about 65 foot, 66 foot up in half an hour. So that went real well. Now we want to start tying them together. I like using zip ties, and you're always going to get a little bit of fluctuation unless you've got perfectly flat ground. So we want to start in the center, find my first seam right here, and I want to line up the bars, and we're just going to tie those first. And we'll do this all the way down and get them close to being lined up. Okay, so we've got this all zip tied together. We started with the centers, got it all lined up, and then I want to zip tie on each side, and you may have to adjust things as you go along if your ground's not perfectly flat, and that's okay. I do not fasten these to the ground or to the rail because the pressure, the outward pressure, will hold them there if you've staked it well on the outside. However, if you're in a windy area, it's probably a good idea to staple those, use some fence staples or something, and attach it to your wood border. Also, like these have a little bit of movement in them. Works great for me, doesn't matter. Again, if it's windy for you or if you're concerned about that, you can put a few stakes, use some more of those rebar stakes, and just put them along the outer edges, and that will stabilize it a little bit. Okay, you guys, so this is our bean tunnel. But remember, you can use this for just about anything that you're gonna trellis, okay? You can grow peas on here, you can grow beans on here. This is a great tomato trellis, cucumbers. I've done all those. I haven't done melons or squashes, but some people like to grow them up, so this would work for that as well. You just gotta probably net some of those larger fruits that are gonna hang. And you can also make a hoop house out of it. If you are gonna make a hoop house out of it though, you're not gonna be trellising, say, your tomatoes or cucumbers, like is what we will probably do. You will have to string them up because you'll have your plastic against here, and that's obviously, you're not gonna be able to trellis there. So that's the bean tunnel. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope this inspires you. Get out there, get your garden growing, and preserve some food. You're going to be glad you did.